Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Football Hipsters English Breakfast Podcast with tonight me, your host Ross Bramble, joined tonight by Mr. Josh Dorr.
Good evening.
And Joel Melwar. Good evening.
Good evening.
Chris, once more, has been taken away by adult responsibilities, so I am once again in the host chair, which is cool because we've had a really terrible weekend of Premier League action, and I cannot wait to get under the hood of it all. But we're actually going to start with the FA Cup. I'm sure many of you know it was FA Cup semi-final weekend. So the first fixture we had on the Saturday was between Chelsea and Tottenham Hotspur. And Joel, 4-2 to Chelsea. I would argue this is probably one of the great FA Cup semi-finals, but at the same time, did 4-2 ultimately sort of flatter Chelsea given how well Tottenham played?
Yeah, I think it did. I think 3-2 would have probably been... If there's going to be a win for Chelsea, 3-2 would have been fair on the balance of it. I think the goal from Matic was unbelievably special and a world-class goal, and I think it did push it slightly in Chelsea's favour. That it looked a bit unrealistic that 4-2 was a fair result. It's kind of systematic of where Spurs are at this season, I feel, and play well and potentially lose, where Chelsea didn't play so well and won. I think 4-2 seems harsh, but you just wonder how much of a mental block that could be for Spurs in the run into the title now, and how much of a psychological boost that could be for Chelsea. Do feel for Spurs because you think they've got everything in place to go on and win something, be it the league, the Champions League when they were in it, or the FA Cup. And again, they fell short, so I think they can look back on I think they'll quickly put that out of their mind, but I think 4-2 does, when you look at that on paper and in history, it will seem incredibly harsh on Spurs on the balance of the game.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the overriding opinion I came away from that game with as well. But Josh, on the title race, obviously Chelsea now through to the final in 5 weeks. We'll talk about their opponent in a minute. Tottenham still a few points left behind in the title race, but do you think this result affects the run-in for either of those teams? I mean, there's a lot of discussion about whether or not Chelsea will now be overstretched or whether Tottenham will just have a clear path towards catching them in the league. Do you read into too much of that, or do you think that a team like Chelsea will be able to balance this and see both out?
I suppose it's the question of the mentality of the Spurs players after this result, how they feel about having to try and catch a team that no matter what they tried to do to them yesterday, they threw a lot at them. Certainly made a few more chances, just weren't very clinical with them. If they can actually turn this around, because that Chelsea team doesn't need to play particularly well to punish teams, and I think this result showed that. I still think Chelsea will win the title. I think Tottenham have got a lot trickier fixtures coming up. They've still got the case of a North London derby to come as well, and I think with both teams in that, we're really in any position to be losing it, and both need to win it to help progress their seasons. I think that I can't see them pulling back Chelsea enough to then overtake them, but I think they will have a strong end to the season.
Both got tough midweek fixtures as well, because obviously we've had fixtures rearranged because of this FA Cup semi-final. Chelsea host Southampton on Tuesday, and Tottenham go away to Crystal Palace on Wednesday. So you may see the table kind of take shape by the end of this weekend, I suspect, especially with that North London derby coming up next Sunday, as you say. But Joel, just finally on this game, simple question. What on earth was Heung-min Son doing when he slid in towards Willian? Or was it Moses? It was Moses, wasn't it? On just the most bizarre area of the penalty box I can ever imagine. Is there any explanation for that tackle? Or did he just lose his head? Did he mismeasure it? What happened?
I think the minute you go to ground now, you're running the risk of giving away a foul or in the box, obviously a penalty. And I think you could just see the minute he went down that was going to be a penalty. And I think Moses kind of was clever in what he did, but what he did was right, and I think you'd encourage your players to do that. If somebody's daft enough to go sliding in like that and commit themselves, then they deserve to be punished in whatever way, and I think that was right. You could argue that was he out of position because he was playing a different position, was he deeper? as a manager, I don't know how you can legislate for that. I don't know what you can do to stop that. That's something psychological that he's taken. What is a stupid decision to go to ground, particularly in the box. I think anywhere in the Premier League now, the quality of the Premier League, anywhere in a kind of 30-yard zone, across the pitch and from the goal line, you cannot commit yourself because the quality of set-piece delivery is unbelievable, and also you run the risk in the box of a penalty. So it was a stupid decision. And what could you even say to him? You just tell him not to dive in the box. So it was a moment of madness, but this is the quality of the football. He will get punished, and Willian dispatched the penalty. And it was a moment of madness from him that he probably won't repeat in the near future, I wouldn't have thought.
Yeah, I have to admit, when I first saw it, I was a little bit annoyed that we'd given that penalty, considering there didn't seem to be any contact for me on Victor Moses. But the more times I saw it, the more times I just thought, if he doesn't dive out of the way of that, then he's getting cleared regardless. And, it's just such a silly decision, especially at that point in the game. But there you go. It's managed to cost Tottenham this time around. Chelsea through to the final 4-2. And Josh, we now know that they will be playing Arsenal in the final. I don't think it's going to be unfair of me to say that on paper, for Arsenal to have beaten Manchester City in this fixture would have taken quite a few people by surprise. At the same time, on the balance of the game, I thought Arsenal were fully deserving of at least extra time, maybe even the win, considering some of the chances that both sides squandered. One thing I really want to talk to you about is that last week when we did our last podcast, I broke the team news to both you and Chris, and we had a little discussion about the fact that Arsene Wenger had switched to a 3 at the back. He played it again in this game against Manchester City. Now, obviously, they managed to beat Middlesbrough with it in midweek. They've now beaten Manchester City with it. Particularly impressed by it? Do you think this is the wave of the future for Arsenal?
I would certainly say it's effective. I'm not a huge advocate with the group of players that Arsenal have got in the squad right now, that this is the formation that we should be playing going forward. I still think we're better suited to a 4-3-3 or something like that, but can't take away that it's resulted in 2 wins, and one of them has resulted in us going into the FA Cup final. The back 3 that were in there today, it was a completely there was no changes in the lineup since the Middlesbrough game, so it's Gabriel, Holding and Koscielny in there, and I think all 3 of them were absolutely superb. Gabriel especially, for a player like Rob Holding as well, who last year was trying to save Bolton from getting relegated from the Championship, to this year playing for an FA Cup semi-final place, is an absolutely huge year for him, and he's just come into Arsenal and just looked absolutely superb. Just to highlight the kind of quality that is in there in the lower depths of the pyramid in English football. I think we may see this continue for the rest of the season if it's going to continue to produce wins and good performances. It is a formation that appears to allow the opposition to have quite a few chances, though. Middlesbrough made quite a few chances midweek, as did Man City in this game. However, I don't think Man City made any as clear-cut chances as Middlesbrough did. That's probably something to do with the fact that Arsenal had to go out and assert themselves on the game and try and draw the opponent out when it comes to Middlesbrough. But for Man City, and it being a semi-final cup game, there's always going to be the opposition, always going to be attacking. So I think that played into Arsenal's hands and allowed them to set up a little better with this formation. But saying that, there were still some issues. I think the first goal, or the only goal from Man City, highlighted some other tactical issues that weren't necessarily formation related. But overall, very happy with the performance, and absolutely superb to be in the FA Cup final for the 3rd time in 4 years.
It's an absolutely fantastic record. I do have to agree with Aguero's goal. When I first saw it, I thought Petr Cech should probably be racing off his line a little bit quicker. As soon as Aguero took that touch, I just kind of assumed that Cech would be able to come out and grab it, but clearly not. But as for Manchester City, I suppose when Monreal scores against you, that's when you know it's Nacho Day. On Arsenal making the final, though, Josh, Arsene Wenger making an FA Cup final, a lot of controversy about whether he's going to be staying or going. I almost get the feeling now that if there's going to be a new Arsene Wenger contract, it will be sometime soon after this success, Do you think making an FA Cup final strengthens or weakens his position when it comes to signing a new deal? Because there will be an argument to suggest that Arsenal making the FA Cup final with the current squad and the season you've had is overachievement, and perhaps he should be riding off into the sunset regardless. But there will of course be other argument that if he's taken you to an FA Cup final, then he should be allowed to continue. So do you think him making the final is anyway indicative of his contract situation?
I think the only thing that could change the feeling at the club, or especially the fan base, is we're just assuming now that in the coming week is when his new contract's going to be announced. If that's what's been on the table, and it was a case of waiting in the marketing department for a decent time of the year or season to announce that he'd signed a new deal and will be with us for an additional X number of years. I think both myself and Chris on the pod have changed our tune when it's come to Arsene Wenger, and begrudgingly we're thinking it is time. And I think I'm definitely thinking more so that way than we did 4 years ago when we went into the FA Cup final in exactly the same situation where Arsenal hadn't signed a new deal and it was all up in the air of what he was going to do and whether or not this was going to be his final hurrah. And I am of the opinion, especially, but to be honest, actually irrespective of if he wins or loses the final, I think it's a time for him to bow out with his head held high, irrespective of what happens, because he has done a fantastic job for the club. And I think it is time for a change.
Yeah, I certainly think some of the magic of Arsene Wenger has been lost over the last few years because of obviously the way things have ended. But certainly, hopefully, for Arsenal fans at least, it's a chance to win another piece of silverware, perhaps wave him off into the sunset. But you never know with Arsene Wenger. There could be another year on the cards. While we're talking about managers, though, Joel, I did want to also ask about Pep Guardiola. Didn't win the League Cup, didn't win the FA Cup, isn't going to be winning the Premier League. Obviously, he will probably consider that a poor start to his time in England because, as you mentioned a few weeks back, he is a winner. He will want those cups. But they have still got Manchester United to play in the Manchester Derby. I think it's this coming Thursday. They've obviously still got to focus on third spot and getting back into the Champions League. But do you think that he'll be able to learn from these kinds of experiences? Do you fully expect them to be back in these kinds of finals this time next year?
Yeah, I firmly believe next season's a huge season for them. But the short-term priority has to be securing that Champions League spot. It's tightened up a real lot now with United winning again today and going on a decent run. I just feel kind of they need to get in the Champions League, and I think it needs a summer of building. Watching that today when they went 1-0 up, they don't do two things that I've seen these Barcelona and Bayern teams do, which is kill teams with goals and possession, and they dropped off and they knocked off today, and then they got punished with Monreal's goal, and then they looked flat. I know they hit the bar and they hit the post, or just to check save it onto the post, but I just feel kind of they don't look still like his team. There's real elements do, and the pace does up front. There's just something that's not right, and they don't control the game enough, which is surprising with the players they have, the De Bruynes and Silvas. Silva going off today was a big loss to him because I think he's his main man, but they just don't have his characteristics yet, which I'm really surprised at this late in the season that they still don't have that. As soon as they went 1-0 today, if you were watching his Barca team, which I saw a lot of, they would have destroyed Arsenal with possession. And that's the best way of defending. That's the best way of minimising any risk of losing that game, getting to the final, is just to keep the ball. I know he had fantastic players in his midfield in that Barcelona team, but that's the way that he wants his team to play, and they just don't seem to have that control. So not only does he need to get the right person in, I think he needs still to work on the style of play. I feel certain, and I really hope, because I want him to succeed. I think next season they will be far, far better. He will have learned a lot. I still don't buy into the thing he's learning from English football. I think he's learning more about his team. It just doesn't have his stamp on that team at the minute. But I think with more coaching and more recruitment, he needs to do that. But the recruitment could be massively hindered if they don't make the Champions League. So his first priority is just to make sure they get the win on Thursday or get a positive result on Thursday, and then his recruitment can be far better on the basis that he's got a Champions League football next season, because that would be a total disaster if they don't make the Champions League. Although, history does prove that a team who doesn't get the Champions League probably goes on and wins the league. I still think he needs to be in that, because that's the elite level of competition that he wants to manage at. The characteristics that he displays, I think he'll be beating himself about this season. I think he really wanted at least one trophy. I don't, in his heart of hearts, we didn't think he could win the league, but I thought he might get a cup. I thought the FA Cup with Arsenal, and then a one-off game potentially against Chelsea, it was his best opportunity, and he's not going to have done it. So I think it is disappointing for him. Really do.
Yeah, I think there'll be a lot of people that will be pointing to his quote-unquote failings this season and waving it as proof, but I'm not entirely sure whether or not I jump on that bandwagon just yet, because regardless of what you might think of Manchester City, they still look to be finishing in the top four, which, considering the season they've had, which I think anyone would agree is a pretty poor season for them, to still be in the top four this season of all seasons is, in my opinion, still pretty impressive. But let's get back into the Premier League fixtures then. We're going to start with the Sunday action whilst we're looking at the top end of the table. We'll go straight to Manchester United. 2-0 away win, I should say, against Burnley. Joel, I think Chris and John spoke about this midweek on the Satchel, but obviously Manchester United lost Marcos Rojo, and they also lost Zlatan Ibrahimovic to pretty nasty injuries midweek. They've come here to a place that's very, very tough. We all know that, Turf Moor. They've managed to get a 2-0 win. Anthony Martial back in from the cold, Wayne Rooney as well. Is this a sign that they can see themselves through for the end of the season without those two talents, or specifically Ibrahimovic, or do we really have to chalk this up to it being Burnley?
No, I think the Ibrahimovic injury gives them a different dynamic now. I feel, for as good as he has been this season, he does massively affect the way you have to play. And I think we saw in the Chelsea game last Sunday when he played Lingard and Rashford up front, he caused Chelsea all different types of problems because they're constantly running in behind. And if you're a defender, one thing you don't want is pace running in behind you. So that will change the way United played. And the first goal today was absolute classic of a goal that they probably wouldn't have scored if Ibrahimovic was playing, because it was fast paced. It was a counter attack, and Martial was the kind of the main protagonist of that. And I think you talk about United and the squad that they've got. They can bring in a £50 million player in Martial as a replacement today, so they will be fine, I think, till the end of the season without him. I don't feel it's like if some team, for example, Liverpool, when they lose Coutinho, don't seem the same. I feel with United they will be fine without Zlatan, as good as he is, because they've got such good backups, and they can also call on Wayne Rooney, who's the forgotten man today, to come in and score as well. So I think more pressing with the injuries at the back. But then they've got, Daley Blin's very good, Smalling's very good, Phil Jones is good. So I think the injuries are bad, but they've got such a massive squad that I don't feel it will hinder them. I think they'll certainly win the Europa League, I do. But I feel like they might even sink the top four now, but I might have just seen Liverpool's results. So it's good options for Mourinho, because it allows him to now play a different style of football with Rashford, Lingard, Martial. It's all about pace, and it's completely in contrast to what they've had for the majority of the season. Yeah,
I think personally that the Manchester City fixture in midweek will probably give you a bit more of a clearer indication of how they're going to do this season, now that Ibrahimovic is gone. But at the same time, they've been without Ibrahimovic a few times this season through various niggles and red cards and such like, and they've come through those patches fine. So I do agree with you that there is now a good chance for them, I think, to be making that top four. But Josh, let's talk about Liverpool then, because if there's one club now in the top four that seems to be putting their position at risk, it looks like it's going to be Liverpool. Now, we've spoken in the past about the impact Sadio Mane has on this team. They finally won a game without him last weekend, but this weekend they've gone and played Crystal Palace, and wouldn't you know it, they've gone and lost that game 2-1, 2 goals from their old boy Christian Benteke. We'll come on to some of the quote-unquote controversy about Mamadou Sakho in a second, but Crystal Palace 2, Liverpool 1 is a massive result at both ends of the table. Is this the kind of result that you think we'll be seeing more of from Liverpool as we get closer? Because once again, they seem to be able to turn up against the big teams, but the smaller teams just seem to be able to get results against them.
Yeah, I totally agree there. It's one of those things that where you look at Liverpool playing a team from the bottom 10 of this table, you look at it as it's going to be a win to the opposition. They're that bad against sides in the bottom half of the table. It's unreal. Even betting companies have turned a blind eye to that fact, and there's money to be had there, to be honest. But with the teams they've got coming up, they've got to play Watford, Southampton, West Ham, and Middlesbrough, and it's only Southampton from that list that are in the top 10. Watford might still be there when they play that fixture next week, but there's a couple more coming up before Liverpool play another game. So I think that could be a sticking point for them. Seeing the 2 goals they conceded to Benteke, it's really, really poor defending in both cases. The second goal especially, just Emre Can's trying to pick up Benteke from a corner, and he's doing quite a good job until the ball's kicked, and then he just completely loses him. Benteke's sitting there unmarked as the ball bobbles through, because it's an awful corner, to be honest. Doesn't really make the first man, but somehow gets through a series of players for Benteke just to stoop down and nod it past Mignolet, who's just all at a wash at the front post, and yeah, it's gone in at the back post. So I think this was something that a few of us who have watched Liverpool could see happening, especially with how they've done this season. But I've still got them to finish outside the top 4. And I think that is still very much a strong possibility with the chasing pack that's behind them. You look at Arsenal, who have got 3 games in hand on them. United have got 2. City have got 2 as well. There's certainly a chasing pack coming up behind them, and I'm not sure that they've got the legs to continue. We've seen this from Klopp teams before across the leagues. We're seeing it from Klopp disciples as well. I'm sure we'll speak about Huddersfield when we get down to the Championship. But these kind of teams with their intense pressing, just falling away right at the end. We've still got Spurs as well, the team under Pochettino, who his sides notoriously drop off near the end of the season as well. So I think it's going to be very interesting, this top 4 race, probably more exciting than the title race. And the relegation, because I think there's just maybe 3 teams in contention for that now as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of permutations towards the Champions League places, and for all the world, Liverpool look like a team that should make it, but it just seems that they just come unstuck against these teams, especially that when they're defensively solid as Crystal Palace have been. I do want to briefly just touch on this Mamadou Sakho issue, though, Josh. I don't think there's a lot here, but there has been some controversy, quote-unquote, that Mamadou Sakho, who obviously couldn't play in this game because he's on loan from Liverpool at Crystal Palace, was caught celebrating the Crystal Palace first goal. I'm not sure about the second, but certainly the first one. A little bit of controversy that you're celebrating a goal against your parent club, etc. I mean, considering his Liverpool career is sort of done, are we making a mountain out of a molehill here, or do you think there's a little bit more to this?
I would agree that it is a mountain out of a molehill. I think looking at how he's been treated by the club, how he was pushed out, really, being told he had attitude problems, and Klopp really having a go at him in the media as well as probably internally. I think that it's more than a given that an ex-player celebrates when score, or the parent club concedes for the club they're currently at when they've scored. To be honest, he's also celebrated an equaliser, so he's probably just happy that as a neutral he's not pissing anyone off, because they'll both be happy with the with the draw, or at least he will be anyway.
Yeah, I think we've seen far too much smoke from something that was a considerably smaller fire than people expected it to be, I think, but certainly still a talking point. It's an issue that needs to be addressed. I'm with you. I don't think there's too much to it, but let's talk about Crystal Palace then, Joel, because obviously you support a team that's involved in this relegation fight. I would expect that you would have looked at Crystal Palace Liverpool and thought, right, there's a fixture that we can sees Palace drop some points in, but they've now won 2-1. They're all the way up to 12th now on 38 points, 7 points clear of the drop. I mean, are they out now? Are they done? Are they safe? Or do we still think that they're in with a chance of being relegated?
No, I think they're safe, and I think fair play to them, because I think the fixtures they had, and then this is the problem we're looking on paper, isn't it? You look at the fixture, you think, oh, they're not going to win that, not going to win that, and they've gone on won games that you just couldn't imagine them winning, i.e., Chelsea away, and obviously we've mentioned today Liverpool, probably more to be expected, but it's just well done to them, basically. And I think from a whole perspective, you're kind of hoping to keep as many teams pegged back and in it as possible. Also having to play Crystal Palace as well, but they've done fantastically well since Allardyce went in there, and I think we spoke a couple of weeks ago about it's not a massive surprise that they've started to pick up considering the talent they've got within the squad. But they've still got to go and win the games, and they've done it. They've done it expertly, and I think they've even still got a hard running now from this point. But 38, you expect they'll get another at least 3 points, so that will take them to 41. So I think Palace are fine. It's just whether they knock off now for the rest of the season, like we've seen some teams do, which will probably come to i.e. Watford. But I think they should be fine, Palace. I think, and like I say, it is begrudgingly well done to them because they've managed to pull clear, given the run that they've had.
Yeah, I don't think anyone would have had them getting 6 points out of Chelsea and Liverpool, but fair play to them. It's the kind of results that keep you up at this point in the season, and 6 points from those two games is a fantastic return. But let's stick with you for a moment and just talk about the other two teams that are in the relegation fight this weekend that picked up some big victories. I'm going to bung them together just for the moment. We'll go in under the hood on their opponents in a minute, but let's go and talk about Hull City and Swansea City, because both of them getting 2-0 home wins this weekend. Hull City over Watford, Swansea City 2-0 over Stoke City. They almost seem to be running in tandem at one point when Sam Clucas crashed in a fantastic goal to seal the deal for Hull. Almost at the identical minute, Tom Carroll was hitting in a fantastic shot for himself. It did take a deflection, but both sides coming out with 3 points. As a Hull fan, I suppose there'll be a part of you that's absolutely delighted, since you did go down to 10 men in the first half hour. Inside the first half hour. But there'll also be a little bit that's disappointed that, despite how brilliant the Hull's result was, that Swansea have managed to match you here. Yeah,
you can look at that two ways. I think, given that. So obviously I was at the game, so it was a kind of a nightmare kind of 10 minutes. So Hull weren't playing particularly well. Then Swansea scored, I think, and then they went down to 10 men. So in that kind of 10-minute period, it went from being this is going okay to this is an absolute nightmare. So on that basis, then when Hull won, it was like, phew, we needed to do that. I think if you hadn't known what was happening at Swansea and was to switch on your phone at 10 to 5 and go, how have Swansea done, it would have been more deflating. I think this is the way now, because you know what has happened elsewhere. You kind of feel, I kind of felt, well, Hull had to win. And the way I see it from a Hull perspective, completely from a Hull perspective, is it's another game done. It's another game closer to the end, and the gap is still as it was kind of at 2:59 on Saturday before the game's kicked off. So I kind of feel that would be more deflating for Swansea than Hull, to be honest, that the other one won, if that makes sense, because they're running out of games. And I know Hull's was a winnable game against Watford, but I think Swansea's was against Stoke as well, because I'd watched Hull's Stoke the week before. I really wasn't impressed with Stoke, although they beat Hull 3-1. I just was not impressed, and I kind of expected Swansea to win. So, but it's going to go down to the wire, that's for absolute certain, and I think there's going to be another twist in it somewhere. Obviously, I hope the twist is that Hull can win an away game, because they've not done that on the Silver yet. But yeah, so I think from a whole perspective, it's just carry on doing what they do. It was interesting that Marcus Silva was asked, did he know the Swansea score throughout the game, and he said no, which is really interesting, because you feel he might have known it, which would then influence his decisions within the second half if they were still drawing, to maybe push for a winner. But he maintained that he didn't know, he didn't want to know, because he just focused on the game in hand, which is interesting, I think.
Well, it's a fantastic 3 points for Hull City, whichever way you cut it, especially with a contentious red card for Oumar Niasse in the first half. And Swansea City, fantastic 2-0 result for them against Stoke City. But I do want to touch on something you just mentioned there, Joel. I want to go back to Josh and talk about their opponents here in Watford and Stoke City. I mean, I think for all intents and purposes, most people would agree they're safe. But I don't know if you will agree with this analogy, Josh, but they remind me a lot of Ipswich Town in the Championship, in terms of, you know, you're going to get a game against them, but I don't think anyone who plays them is particularly afraid of them. And I think a lot of teams who need points in their run-ins, whether it's for the Champions League places, whether it's for the relegation places, I get the feeling that a lot of those teams are going to look at the Watford and Stoke fixtures they may or may not have coming up and think, there's 3 points. Now, is that because they've had poor seasons? Is that because they've been caught out by a league that's just been so wildly erratic this year? I mean, the mid-table in this division this season is pretty incredible. Have we been duped into thinking they're worse than they are, or do you think these are two sides that are in need of heavy reinvestment in the off-season?
I think I'll start with Stoke. they've certainly had a poor season. I think for what you'd expect and the investment that they've made in that squad, they should certainly be finishing a lot higher than that. You've got the likes of West Brom up at 8th. I think they should be up there at least, knocking on the door of 50 points for this season. I think that should have been their target, and I think they should probably have been looking to finish maybe in Europe as an initial look, and then the strength of, I think, the current top 7 is just obscene. If you look at the names that are up there, that Arsenal have been spat out the bottom because they've got games in hand, and the rest have played more. That I think Stoke definitely need to reassess what they're looking for. I don't think they had particularly good cup runs either, because that's realistically something you'd be looking at. A team that is mid-table and can't necessarily push upwards up the table need to be looking sideways to cups and trying to establish decent runs in there. A couple of trips to Wembley in semi-finals. As for Watford, I think it's a slightly different transitional season. They've got new manager in, Walter Massari, and I think overall, I think they will be disappointed with how they've played, because they have come up and been used to, the Watford fans, a more intense, more buccaneering style in the way that Watford have played. But I would agree with the analogy of someone like Ipswich, although I will go into the fact that I think in the Championship, even when teams are relegated or just anywhere, they'll always give you a game. I think they're more likely at this level to, be quote unquote on their holidays already, playing in flip-flops. I think that's probably what we'll see from Watford and Stoke in the next couple of weeks. And I think if especially Stoke continue with those kind of performances come the end of the season, I think Mark Hughes will need to seriously look over his shoulder at potentially being moved on over the summer.
Yeah, I've certainly seen some Stoke fan unrest with Mark Hughes over the course of this season. I think there was an expectation that they should be doing a lot better than they are, and Watford fans, I'm always very interested to hear from Watford fans, because they were very split about Quique Sanchez-Flores, but the board obviously made the decision because they are a very ambitious board, and you do wonder about Matsari as well. You do wonder if his position will be under threat come the summer.
Just to come in on Watford there, I think, being at the game yesterday, I think there was nothing short of kind of an appalling attitude from the Watford players. To be against 10 men for the best part of 65 minutes yesterday and not smell blood and not win that game, or not even be likely to win that game, was just really, really poor. And I think Torre Dini hit the nail on the head on Match Today when he kind of said he'd apologise to the fans, because I get the fact that they're safe and I get the fact they've not got much to play for, but they're a professional footballer and I think they have to want to win. I can't understand the mentality that they might, they're not that fussed about winning, because you'd want to win every game that you play. And I think it was so disappointing. And they brought maybe 1,500 fans up yesterday. It's a good 4 hours car journey. I think that was so disappointing for them. And I think if you're a Watford fan, would you go to the next game when you're mid-table, 4-hour drive? Well, probably not, because yesterday they had a perfect opportunity to go win a match and they just didn't look interested. And you think, well, that's because they've got not much to play for, but you think that professionalism would override that. But it didn't. And from my perspective as a whole fan, I was delighted that it was Watford, to be honest, because I think down 10 men against the top side, you would have been ripped apart and punished. But they just didn't smell any blood, and I think that was just so disappointing from a Watford perspective.
Yeah, I've got to say, when we played them a couple of weeks ago, we won 4-3 on the day, but I wasn't overly impressed with Watford. I don't think they showed enough. Despite the fact they managed to get 3 goals, I didn't think Watford were all that. And I think there will be a lot of fans, and possibly even the board, that may be thinking that as well. But nonetheless, they're still safe. That may be all that some fans wanted to see. But it's a strange one, especially with the erratic nature of the owners. I'm still of the opinion that Quique Sanchez-Flores didn't do anything wrong last season, but there you go.
Obviously, with the whole Pozzo family, I know they've sold Granada now, but they just remind me of Granada. Loads of different players, loads of different nationalities, not much of a blend, no theme to the team, no real style of play. It just is that erratic nature of loads of recruitment, loads of players in, loads of players out, continually chairing the manager over the players. They're just very similar. And I guess I don't follow Udinese, but I guess they follow the same pattern as well. That there's just this legacy of just constantly changing everything at once. There's no consistency.
would you say that just go to Granada, the fans there got to the point where they were getting a little disillusioned with the team itself? Because I think that Watford are one player being sold away from the whole fan base becoming disillusioned in Troy Deeney leaving, who's rumoured to be going in the summer. And I think if he goes, then the fan base would just become so disillusioned with the squad, because there isn't that English talent in that team, someone that they can go, that is our talisman, which I think is the only thing that's keeping Watford fans on board with the Pozzo family at the moment.
But it just looked yesterday like a team without any identity, and that's what I've said on the other pod about Granada. And it's just no coincidence that I know Granada are now sold, but it's the same family behind both clubs for the last 2 or 3 seasons. And I thought I rate Sanchez Flores as a manager. I think he's great, and I think it's so disappointing that he was let go by Watford. But Massara is a good coach, but then the churn of players is huge. There's no stability to that team, is there? I think the longest player, 7 players, Deeney, and say if he goes, then where they are. So I think a big summer for Watford, I think.
I think Deeney is probably about the only one that's still there since the Pozzo family came in, because I watched them a lot in the Championship, and they changed managers, I think, 3 times in one season, where Jokanovic took it for about 6 weeks and then had to leave, and there was someone before him, Oscar Garcia, that was in there for a little while. I can't even remember now. But
he was before he then had his heart issue, or was that over in Spain?
No, I'm pretty sure that was Watford. They had a crazy season of 3 or 4 managers going in there, and they still managed to go up, don't get me wrong, but
Billy McKinley. Did he go in there? Billy McKinley?
He might have done. I'd need to do some research. I'm not sure if the name rings a bell with Watford, but we'll have to do some research in a minute and find out. But certainly I think the Pozzo family's spell there has been quite tumultuous. I'm not sure whether you'd, as a Watford fan, just be grateful they took you back up, or whether you're kind of getting tired of them at the moment. But still, like you say, it could be a very big summer window for them, and who knows what they'll bring to the table next year. But I think if we're sat here this time next year saying, no, they've had another erratic season, then maybe there'll be some signs from the fans as well that time may be up. But let's move on to the final game, or not even the final game. The other game I was going to talk about, let's go to that now since I brought it up. It was so terrible that I'm not even going to really mention it. It was West Ham 0, Everton 0. It was so poor that Ronald Koeman said he wanted to make 10 substitutes at half-time. And I think that sums it up. It was not a very good game of football. It didn't really matter to either side, so we're going to leave it behind. Sorry, West Ham Everton fans. We're going to move on to the most interesting game of the weekend, which was Middlesbrough versus Bournemouth. Josh, I think this game was kind of done after 20 minutes, and that upsets me a little bit. I still think Middlesbrough, and have all season, thought that Middlesbrough were in real danger of going down. And over the past few weeks, especially since Karanka has left, I think you saw the Middlesbrough side that I expected to see the entire season. This kind of glass cannon approach to playing football in the Premier League. And this weekend they got absolutely taken apart by AFC Bournemouth. 4-0 full time. By 20 minutes they were 2 goals down and had Gaston Ramirez sent off for 2 yellow cards. The first was a completely stupid dive, and the second was an equally stupid slide tackle. Is there any hope for Middlesbrough at this point? I mean, they looked very limp. Some of the defending for some of those goals was hideously poor. They're now going to be without Gaston Ramirez for at least a game. Is there much hope for Boro, or do you think this is the first of the final nails in their coffin?
I agree. It is the start of their demise and them leaving the Premier League via the exit door. I think they were absolutely hopeless in this game. Obviously, Ramirez going off hasn't helped them, but I think since January, where he didn't get his move to Leicester, just the fact he's anywhere near that squad, they were completely hamstrung with how they dealt with that, preceding the fact that they said, okay, well, we're not going to sell you. But then they didn't bring in anyone to kind of push him to say, you're staying here, but, you know, we're still going to bring someone in who can do your job. And they've been over-reliant on a player that doesn't want to be there. And it's shown by the results, because Middlesbrough, when they've played well, Gaston Ramirez has been at the heart of it. And I think just seeing the petulance in what he's been doing, I feel like the board and the manager only have themselves to blame. Although Karanka has now left the club, I think the fact that they held on to him and didn't get a player out, and it's just shown what can happen when it can backfire when you try and be the hard club and you leave someone in there, and the poisonous atmosphere and the poisonous performances of them have just eked into the squad, and they've not been able to recover from that.
No, I can certainly tell you that's the Gaston Ramirez I remember from Southampton, and he's the Gaston Ramirez that I was not at all sad to see go on loan to Hull and then go to Boro in the Championship. But there you go. Maybe that's his last act in a Middlesbrough shirt. But Joel, I mean, we could talk about Bournemouth. I mean, let's not downplay. It's a fantastic result for them against, albeit a team that wasn't really out the races on the weekend. But still, 4-0 for Bournemouth is a fantastic result. Could still be on course for their highest ever Premier League finish. Although I'm not sure I read into that stat too much, since this is only their second season in it. But the one thing I did want to talk about Bournemouth from this week, I do want to get a non-Arsenal perspective from this, Joel. Jack Wilshere. Now, obviously, he's had this leg fracture. It looks like he'll be out for the rest of the season with it. Talk of whether or not it will affect his negotiations with Arsenal. If you're Bournemouth, do you look at what Jack Wilshere's done for Bournemouth this year and say, you know what, let's talk about something next season as well? Or do you look at him and say, you know what, I don't think we got our money's worth?
Yeah, the latter. When they set the deal up and you heard the numbers mentioned for the loan fee and his wages, I kind of felt that was just slightly ambitious, given the fact of his injury check record. Surprisingly, he stayed fit, which I think has taken everybody by surprise. But then I think the fact that he stayed fit and the impact that he's made has been minimal. Now, I've not watched Bournemouth every week, so I can't say, I've watched every minute, so I can assess him fully. But you assessed him on the basis of, are people raving about him? Well, not really. Have you seen him on highlights packages where he's setting up goals and scoring goals? Well, not really. He's just kind of meandered through the season. I think at one point, Eddie Howard left him out of the team and reverted back to kind of Sermon and the likes of, Harry Arter always plays with Sermon and Dan Gosling. And I think that said everything to me. When they needed to dig in, he wasn't in it. When they went to a 4-4-2, it seems like he can't play in a 4-4-2. So I think for Bournemouth, if I were them, at the numbers, he'd be asking for, 100k a week, probably plus. I won't go anywhere near it because I think they can get better value elsewhere. I think the only positive that's come from it is the fact that he can play a full season, albeit he's got injured now, but it's quite late in the season. It's a fracture. It's not, I don't think it's an existing injury that he's had before that's flared back up. So I think it's something that I don't think Bournemouth would look to explore. It could have worked. It could have been great for them. It could have been absolutely brilliant. He could have got player of the season. It could have been a world beater, but I just don't think he has been. Long term, does it mean he's a bad player? No, because I think he could go and play with better players at Arsenal. That's not being disrespectful to Bournemouth, and still be a good footballer because he is a good footballer. Some players can drop down and look really good and help the team. Others need the full support of a good team around them to be a good player, and I think he falls into the second category.
Certainly been a very interesting season for him at Bournemouth. But Josh, now let's get an Arsenal perspective on him. I've seen this week Wilshere linked to a new deal with Arsenal. I've seen him linked to Pep Guardiola and Manchester City. I've seen him linked to West Ham. I've seen him linked to Bournemouth. As an Arsenal fan, do you think he's had a good season? Do you think he's done enough to stay? Where do you think he's going to go if he is to go? Because there's a wide range of clubs there on that list, and honestly, it wouldn't surprise me to see him at any of them.
I think Jack is very much an enigma since he came out at 16 or so, had that amazing game against Barcelona. It's probably about 4 years ago now or so, in the Champions League, where the likes of Xavi and Iniesta were saying this boy is special. You knew that there was something for him. I think the expectation of what fans who don't watch Jack Wilshere thought he was as a player has certainly changed. He's not a guy that gets you the assist. He's the guy that generally plays the ball to the guy that then gets the assist. He's the second assist guy, which isn't really a stat looked at a lot in European football. In the MLS, they're all over that stat. I'm not sure why. It's probably something in the water over there, but that's where Jack Wilshere shines. He's someone that dictates the play, but isn't always the one that's going to finish a move off or be directly involved with the assist for it to play that final killer pass. He's something in between. And for where he was at Bournemouth, I thought it could be great for him if they played to his strengths, which I think for a while they did. But then once Josh King hit form playing in the number 10, I don't think Eddie Howe could drop Josh King. And there was nothing more that Jack Wilshere could bring you from how he was being deployed in that team. He's not a defensive midfielder by any stretch of the imagination. He does like to get stuck in, but that doesn't make him defensive. He is box to box, and where they play Arter and Sermon, who are more inclined to sit, just mop up and allow the front four to do what they want. I think overall, he has had a good season. It was nice to see him go through it without getting too many bad injuries and just get a couple of 90 minutes under his belt. But overall, I would look at how Bournemouth's transfer dealings overall have been. I don't think they've made good transfer signings at all whilst they've been in the Premier League. There's a couple, but Jordan Ibe for 15 million is a very strange one. Max Gradle is a huge player that hasn't even had a look in there and was tearing up treason for Leeds, which then got him a move to St Etienne, and was player of the season only for Dimitri Payet at St Etienne when he was there. And I think there's certain things that I would start to question about Eddie Howe, about the players he's bringing in and not being able to necessarily bring them into a system that he wants to, because I think looking at the team that generally goes out, there's not a huge amount of players there that are any different to the squad they initially came up with. Yeah,
it's an interesting point that you make about Eddie Howe's buying record, because I don't think his selling record is all that good myself. I think the summer they had last year was pretty horrendous, not just for some of the quality they brought in, but certainly some of the ones they let out. I mean, you can say Nathan Ake was a fantastic acquisition, but clearly they've lost him in January and not been the same club since. But I think losing Matt Ritchie and not really replacing him was a massive blow, especially when you're going to roll the dice on someone like Jordan Ibe, who personally I still think will come good, but when you're in the Premier League, when you're in Bournemouth's position, you certainly expect them to be reaping repaying, I should say, the transfer fee as quickly as possible. But that's the weekend's fixtures. We're going to quickly look at the midweek fixtures. We're not going to do a guessing game here, but I do want your guys' opinion on the Thursday fixture. Tuesday you have Chelsea versus Southampton. On Wednesday you have Arsenal versus Leicester, Middlesbrough versus Sunderland, which you would imagine is Middlesbrough's last hope, if there is any, and Crystal Palace versus Tottenham Hotspur. And then we have the Manchester Derby, Manchester City, at home to Manchester United. Just a quick one then on the Manchester Derby. Who do you think is going to win this one? I'm going to start with you, Joel. Any particular favourites for this game?
I think Man City will win. I think this will fire them up. I feel like they'll have to quickly prioritise this game. It's all they've got to play for now. Whereas I think United have still got that safety net of being able to go to the Europa League. So I think you may even see, I can't guarantee, you may even see a strange lineup by Jose in this one to keep the players fresh, given the run of fixtures that they've got coming up. So I think I do fancy Man City for that, and it's at the Etihad as well, which they're generally quite good at as well. So I fancy Man City for that one.
Well, we've got one for Manchester City. Josh, any differing opinions?
I can see this as a score draw, probably a 1-1. I think with the lineup that Man United put out this weekend, there are a number of big players. Rashford was on the bench, Valencia wasn't in the squad, and I think that the way that Jose got his team set up when they played Chelsea, I think he'll do exactly the same as he did. And you could see Man City today almost run out of ideas when it came to Arsenal's back five. And I think Jose will have seen that and will easily implement a system to completely nullify Man City's forward line. I can see them with the fact that Rojo is injured, that they're going to have to play Daley Blind at centre-back. I think Man City can prey upon that, but other than that, I can only see it really being a draw. I don't think Mourinho can get a win, but it wouldn't surprise me if he did. I just can't see City winning it, to be honest.
No, I can't see either side winning it, actually. I don't think personally I can make a strong enough case for either of them. Personally, I'm going to go for a score draw, but it wouldn't surprise me either way to see either one of them winning, because like Joel was saying, Manchester City have certainly got a lot to play for, but Manchester United will be desperate for the points to get them into the Champions League place while the chance is there. So let's quickly finish the Premier League weekend with the table then. Chelsea, Tottenham, Liverpool, Manchester City and Manchester United, all non-movers. The Manchester United do now close the gap on Manchester City to a single point. Everton move up to 6th, just for now at least, with Arsenal with 3 games in hand on them on 58 points. West Brom, Southampton and Watford all stay in their same position positions. Stoke City managed somehow to move up to 11th. Probably that's going to be a goal difference. Crystal Palace move all the way up to 12th on 38 points now. You would almost say they're safe now. I think we've been saying for the past few weeks now that 38 points is probably going to be enough to keep you up this year. Bournemouth on the same amount of points, so are West Ham. Leicester moved down to 15th on 37, but they still have 2 games in hand over some of the teams above them. Burnley now down to 16th on 36 points. Hull City on 33, 1 place out of the relegation zone, with Swansea, Middlesbrough and Sunderland currently your bottom 3. So let's move on to the EFL then. Now, with the EFL essentially all wrapped up, with only 1 or 2 fixtures left, depending on which league you look at, I'm not going to delve too much into the mid-table, because the mid-table at this point kind of means nothing. We're just going to be looking mainly at the ups and the downs from the last couple of games for the next couple of weeks. So let's start in League 2, and it's sad news for Leyton Orient fans, and I'm sure for many football fans around the world as well, because the Leyton Orient story has travelled far and wide. They have officially been relegated this weekend. A 3-0 defeat to Crewe Alexandra put pay to their time in the Football League, which I believe is in excess of 110 years in the Football League. But they have finally now been relegated after, as we know, some torturous months and weeks flirting with the possibility. They go down currently on 36 points with 2 games left to play, but it's the end of a torrid season for Leyton Orient, and now we just have to hope that they can win the battles off the field. Hartlepool United have dropped into the relegation zone this weekend. It's the first time this season that Newport County have been out of the bottom 2, and if you've been following the pod all year, you'll know how poor Newport County have been over the course of the season. To now see them out of the relegation zone is quite a shock, but Hartlepool United drop into the relegation zone now, 43 points, 2 points behind Newport County. And up at the top, we already know, of course, that Doncaster, Plymouth and Portsmouth are up. They'll be fighting for the title in the last 2 games of the season. There's only 4 points now between Doncaster in first and Portsmouth, I should say, in third. But we do have some movers and shakers in the playoffs. As we know, nearly half the division can still make it into the playoff positions. Currently now occupied by Luton Town, Exeter City, Blackpool and Stevenage, but Mansfield, Wickham, Carlisle and essentially half the rest of the league still breathing down their necks, so it will be a tight run-in, but Blackpool the main winners this weekend for the playoffs with a 3-0 home win over Cheltenham, moving them up to 6th. League 1. League One's automatic promotion place will be decided on the final day, because League One finishes next Sunday. All the games kick off at midday so that no one can, know the results of their opponents. It will be decided on next Sunday between Bolton and Fleetwood. Which of those 2 teams will go up on the final day? Swindon Town have, however, been relegated this weekend. They were relegated by Scunthorpe, a 2-1 defeat there. That is, of course, Tim Sherwood's current house, Swindon Town. But they will be plying their trade in League 2 next season. And Port Vale could be going down this week. They have to play their game in hand against Walsall this week. If they lose to Walsall or draw, they will be relegated. Essentially, anyway, because of goal difference. If they draw, I still think they can make it on points, but they need a massive swing in goal difference to drag Gillingham into it. So, for all intents and purposes, if Port Vale do anything but win in midweek against Walsall, they will be down. And considering their recent record of a string of defeats, you would expect them at this point to be going down with Swindon, Coventry and Chesterfield. That is essentially the current state of Leagues 1 and League 2. Like I say, League 1 will be wrapping up next weekend, so we'll be having an eye keenly put on Bolton and Fleetwood as well. But Bradford also secured their playoff place, I should say, this weekend with a good win for them. Into the Championship then. Now the Championship is just all over the place at the moment. We have had so many weird goings on, especially in the last round of fixtures. We're going to start near the bottom, and I'm going to immediately go to Birmingham City, because last week, as we mentioned on the last pod, they allowed, or I should say, Gianfranco Zola resigned as Birmingham City manager after 2 wins to 22. We were asking who would take that job. The answer, of course, was Harry Redknapp. He is now in charge at Birmingham City. He has 3 games to save them, or should I now say 2. His first game in charge was a 1-0 defeat to Aston Villa, which now puts them 2 points from safety on 47, Blackburn on 45. Wigan Athletic essentially down now on 41. They will be relegated next weekend, depending on results, but if they desperately needed Birmingham City to lose, they have now done that, so they still have a chance, but it just seems quite improbable for Wigan at this point. At the top end of the division, we have Leeds United. Now, Leeds United have, I think, for a long time impressed both Josh and I, and as well as Chris. All season, they've been absolutely brilliant. The turnaround under Gary Monk has been profound. I think all 3 of us picked them to win the playoffs this season. They are currently 7th, fallen all the way out of the playoff zone, 3 points now behind Fulham, and the goal difference is plus 13 in favour of Fulham. It looks now that Leeds United may have blown their chance of the playoffs. There's still 2 games to go. Could all change, but that seems a bit improbable at this point. Only 1 win in their last 5. Like I say, 3 points behind Fulham now, and minus 13 goal difference against Fulham. The top 4, or the playoffs I should say, are now Reading, Sheffield Wednesday, Huddersfield and Fulham. Plenty of changing there with Huddersfield cannoning down from third place. Leeds United, though, falling straight out into 7th. We'll come back to the Championship in a minute, but I do want to first talk about League 2, because like I was saying, Leyton Orient officially relegated. I think we've spoken about Leyton Orient enough. I think we know the story. It would be almost cruel of us to carry on harping on about the Leyton Orient story. We just have to hope that they don't go out of business. Hartlepool, though, Joel, I mean, like I was saying there, the idea that Newport County are out of the bottom 2 is ridiculous given the season they've had. The idea that Hartlepool are now back in there is equally as ridiculous. This weekend they have had a bit more media, I would say, because Jeff Stelling, as we all know, a very prominent Hartlepool fan, president at Hartlepool as well, said on TV that he wants Dave Jones sacked and suggested that he would even resign as the chairman if they would then allow Dave Jones to go. Some questions of whether or not this is ethical. Do you have an opinion on it? Is it just passion bubbling to the surface, or is this something that he shouldn't really be doing on national TV, given his platform?
Yeah, it did feel a bit uncomfortable, to be honest. I think in any type of public forum like that, where somebody's asking for somebody else to lose the job, just makes you feel slightly uncomfortable. I think there should be a line drawn at that point. It's a little bit kind of Arsenal fan TV-ish, really. I think that's what it became yesterday. But 2 things on it. Dave Jones clearly can't be trying to do a bad job. He's clearly trying his best. Maybe he's out of his depth. That should then be taken out of his hands. But then I also don't feel Jeff Stelling should be doing that on TV and asking for someone to lose the job. But how far has it gone? Obviously, he cares about the club so much that it's taken for him to do that. He's kind of infamous for these rants on about football and Hartlepool to consider late goal and stuff. We've seen it, but I think that went one or 2 steps further than we've seen before. And it'll be really interesting to see what they need to do. What they need to do, or what they do now with 2 games left. What's the solution though? With 2 games left, what is the solution? It's very difficult to go. I know Birmingham were trying it, but they were forced to try it. Hartlepool going to get a new manager for 2 games who doesn't know the players. Would that be more of a risk? I don't know. I really don't know. I just did feel slightly uncomfortable when I saw it though, and it's something I don't think we've ever seen that before, have we? I can't really think of a time where I can think, that's like that incident. I can't really think of it, to be honest. But that's because he's not. He's not completely impartial on that show, though, is he? Some people are who support teams and they're on a show such as that. He is very kind of completely pro Hartlepool when they score and things. So I guess he's bubbled under a little bit, but for him to go that far was just quite surprising and shocking, really.
He did have a bit of a mini snap last week when they lost to Leyton Orient, which was quite disrespectful to Orient. But again, it was one of those that was... The video went viral, but nothing more came of it because it was like, well, it's League 2. The media don't really care about it that much. But I think for what he said this week was far more disrespectful than what he said to an opponent, but to his own club.
I just think he's created absolutely loads of pressure now for Dave Jones. He's clearly trying to do his best. He's under so much pressure now because everyone's going to be looking for Hartlepool's result on Saturday. So, and if they don't win that, they've got 1 game left. So I just think he should have just called the chairman up. Clearly he's got those links to the live president. Call the chairman up. Is there any chance of Dave Jones going, no, blah, blah, I think you should, blah, blah. I don't think you should have gone on road doing that on TV, because if they've got no intention of sacking Dave Jones at all, then he has just created massive pressure for him now. So you can imagine how Dave Jones must feel anyway. Can't have been the best thing for him to see last night.
Yeah, I think... I do side with you guys. I mean, I love Soccer Saturday, I love Jeff Stelling, but to have watched it was a little uncomfortable. Like you say, there's still a human aspect to this, and although Hartlepool are a club that you would say are too big to be in to be outside of the Football League, little bit disrespectful. At least that's the feeling I got from it. It was one of those things I would rather have seen kept behind closed doors. But nonetheless, it's out there, and as of yet, Dave Jones has not been sacked, which means that Jeff Stelling may indeed have to resign as president, but we'll have to see how it plays out. There's still 2 games left of the season. They may yet stay up, and if they do, I suspect then Jeff Stelling will be the first to offer an apology. But moving into League One, Josh, we're going to be deciding our automatic promotion place on the final day. Bolton Fleetwood will be the decider. Bolton will host Peterborough, and Fleetwood will host Port Vale, who, like I was saying there, could be relegated depending on their result against Walsall in midweek. I think it's probably fair to say that Bolton have played the best football over the course of the season out of these 2, but I think the story of Fleetwood Town, now under Uwe Rosler, I think it's now, 7 promotions in 13 seasons? It's something ridiculous like that. It could be another one this year if they can achieve it. Do you have a particular favourite for this one, or do you have a particular preference for this one? Because I think they're both teams that will feel hard done by if they end up in the playoffs and manage to miss out.
Yeah, I think it's expected that Bolton came straight back up from the Championship, or came straight back up to the Championship. The size of the squad they had and the budget they've got is much higher than teams around them, but you can't always put away the underdog story in Fleetwood, and I think it would be a fantastic achievement for them. But with Bolton need to basically lose their game against Peterborough for any chance of Fleetwood turning it around with the superior goal difference that they've got. I think that we are going to see Bolton go through this now. They're just at the moment going through a spell of just not losing games. They've got a 0-0, won 2-0 at the weekend. I think they're just a very solid team at the moment and can shut teams out, especially with it being at home as well. Wouldn't it be great for them to celebrate that at home? I think Fleetwood probably have enough to get through the playoffs, irrespective of how well they do, although it could be a very tough game for them against Millwall if that's who they draw in the semis. I think in the final, in a one-off game, I think they'll do absolutely fine. But it would be nice to see them both up in the Championship next season.
Yeah, certainly on the basis of the seasons they've had, I think there can be little doubt that both sides completely deserve it. Just to clarify the state of play there, Fleetwood have to better Bolton's results if they wish to if they wish to jump over them. If Bolton lose, however, and Fleetwood only draw, then it will still be Bolton going up. So whichever way you look at it, Fleetwood need to win, and same for Bolton really. A draw would do them, but they'll be looking to win as well. And for the record, I suspect that both sides will be relatively happy with the teams they have. Bolton, like I say, against Peterborough, who are quite goal friendly, but certainly leak a lot of goals as well. And then Fleetwood at home to Port Vale, who, like I say, could be relegated this time next week. So I think they'll both be relatively confident of getting the 3 points that they're going to need. But let's go to the Championship then. I'm going to stick with you for a minute, Josh. I didn't really do the weekend justice with some of the results we've seen. Nottingham Forest 3, Reading 2 is a massive result at both ends of the table, especially for Nottingham Forest. Essentially keeps them up at this point unless something dramatic happens in the last 2 weeks. Sheffield Wednesday 2-1 win against Derby County strengthens their place in the playoffs. Fulham with just the most dominating 4-1 win I can remember against Huddersfield Town this weekend as well brings them even more closer to an official playoff place. Drags Huddersfield Town back down now into 5th. But now being 2-1 win over Leeds. That's a massive result for both ends of the division. Leeds United now 3 points out of the playoffs, but are now pulling themselves clear. Bristol City essentially staying up this weekend with a 3-2 win over Barnsley. We've seen some crazy results, but the 2 teams I want to focus on predominantly, and we'll probably touch on Brighton in a second, but the 2 teams I wanted to speak on predominantly were Fulham and Birmingham. Both for different reasons, both at different ends of the table. Now, Fulham, like I say, I watched the game against Huddersfield, and I can't remember seeing Huddersfield get torn apart as easily as Fulham did in that game. You were speaking about Fulham a little bit earlier, Liverpool a little bit earlier, and saying that some of the disciples of Klopp, like David Wagner at Huddersfield, starting to boil down as the season comes to an end now. Do you think that's all it was for Huddersfield this weekend, or do you just think that Fulham are just in such insatiable form that this is a warning shot, really, for the rest of the playoffs, because they look now to be secure in 6th?
I think it's a bit of both with the the performance that Huddersfield put out. I think for the way that Fulham play, they benefit from playing a team that is very expansive, as well as them. Huddersfield do look to hit teams on the break, which means there is a lot of gaps for a counter-attack because they're so fluid. There's not a lot of structure to how Huddersfield attack compared to other teams, and I think Fulham just picked him off nice and easily. I say Huddersfield have come to the point where there's been a couple of results that they've put out where you're looking, does look like they're just winding down as a team. A draw with Derby County last week as well doesn't really help because Derby have been awful, even with Rowett in charge. Now that I think a team like Huddersfield should have been getting a win there, I think they have just slowly dropped away. I think Fulham now look like the team to avoid in the playoffs. I think looking at the form of Reading as well, who are coming into the playoffs not particularly well, I think that's where we could see Fulham making the final if they come up against Reading, who just haven't been at the races for a couple of weeks now. And I think that's where we'll find teams getting unstuck now. They need to, the 4 teams that are in the playoffs need to really get a decent run of form ahead of them to really get anything out of the playoffs, because that's where we see the teams that do well there are the teams that finish strongest at the end of the season.
Yeah, I completely agree on Reading. I look at Reading and I just don't fancy them whatsoever. The fact they're third surprises me because I don't see them as a third place team. You know, they just seem very unstable element in that playoff positions. But I'm going to stick with you just for a minute on Birmingham City as well. I mean, we've now got Harry Redknapp in charge. He won't be accepting a wage if they are relegated. They lost this weekend to Aston Villa in the Second City derby. 2 tough fixtures left to go. I believe Huddersfield on the final day as well. Do you think Harry's the man? Can he keep them up? Or do you think that Birmingham, at this point, are prime to be picked off by someone like Blackburn?
Well, he said when he came into the job that I think they need 4 points from the last 3 games to cement their position in the Championship, where he's now got 2 games to get 4 points. And as you say, with the fixtures you've got coming up, it's Huddersfield next week and Bristol City away on the final day of the season. It could be it is a tough job for him to go in. I'm very, very surprised to see him actually take the position to start with. It was a very odd appointment. We did say that when Zola went, it was expected, although it would be strange if they did have someone lined up. And I think last week, with all the names we threw out there, not one of us named Harry Redknapp. And I think he is a very, very good manager. So that's what they're looking for from him. Obviously, he's not going to be able to implement a new system in that time, but he can get the players fired up and hopefully get a performance out of them. Didn't necessarily have a great performance today against Villa, but I think when we see them play Huddersfield, I think that's going to be the big test for them, especially as a home game with the crowd behind them. Hopefully that will get them the points they need to stay in the division.
Tough running, very tough running. I suspect Blackburn will have the biggest say in whether or not Birmingham stay up at this point, because Birmingham just seem to be slipping and sliding. I think the onus is completely on Blackburn, who only could get a 0-0 draw against Wolves this weekend. I think if they'd won that, then pressure would be right on Birmingham. But I think for now, pressure's still on Blackburn. Joel, let's just quickly finish up with Leeds then. We've just been talking about it there. They've fallen completely out of the playoffs now, down to 7th. I think all 3 of Josh and Chris picked Leeds to go up through the playoffs. They might not even make it at this point. I mean, they're an odd club, Leeds, because there are a lot of people that look at Leeds and remember some days where perhaps the fan base were not as, what's the polite way of saying it, not as endearing as other groups of fans. But this year, I mean, you look at the state of the club when Gary Monk walked in there to now look at it now, it's just a complete rejuvenation job, and I think Gary Monk deserves a lot of credit for it. If they were to miss out on the playoffs now, I don't know, would you... It's difficult to say. Would you be surprised by that? Would you be particularly impressed by them finishing 7th after all the turmoil they've had? Would you be Happy to see them in the Championship for another season, or is there a part of you that says, you know what, they really do deserve these playoff places?
I think over the course of the season, it's weird. Over the course of the season, they probably deserve a playoff spot, but the cliche is the table doesn't lie, and at the end of the day, after 46 games, you draw a line, you say this is where everyone finishes, and somehow they've managed to fall out of those playoff places at completely the wrong time, a really bad period of form, and if it is Fulham that replaces them, then you've got to give it to Fulham that they, over the 46 games, they've been the better team. I think they've made massive steps forward this season, Leeds. I didn't particularly expect them to be as high as they've been at some points. And I think that Monk deserves great credit for that. He's brought stability to a club that didn't have any. I think the structure off the pitch has slightly improved as well, with the kind of erratic owner taking more of a backseat and letting more kind of professional people deal with the run of the football club, which has paid dividends. But I think if you're a Leeds fan now, to miss out would be truly devastating because you've been there all season. And I think you probably prime yourself for the playoffs and potentially getting back into the Premier League, which is where Leeds want to be. I think to drop out now would just be really, really, well, it is disappointing. I saw Gary Monk's interview yesterday saying that they didn't deserve it, blah, 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 but it doesn't really matter that now, does it? They've just got to win matches, whether they deserve it or not. I think they've just got to win football games. He spoke about 3 cup finals. They've got to win 3 cup finals, but they've lost 1 now. So, and they've got Norwich and Wigan, 2 teams who've not got a great deal to play for, really. So you still fancy Leeds to pick up 2, maybe one or 2 wins, probably 2 wins. But I just think they'll look back, if they don't make it, a real opportunity missed this season. I really do. Because once you're there, you might as well take off. If it was unexpected to get there, you might as well just grab it with both hands and take it and move forward. So I think it will be a massive disappointment. But they'll come again because they've got a large support base. They've got decent structure now, and they've got the revenue stream is large at Leeds, so they can compete at the higher end of the Championship anyway. But it is disappointing the way they've fallen off. And just as you mentioned, teams with momentum, you don't want to be going into the playoffs stumbling into them, and I think that's what they will be doing if they made it anyway. Whereas the likes of Fulham are massively on the up, going into the playoffs full of confidence. Was it Crystal Palace one year? And that Fulham was down as Crystal Palace, but remember Palace when they got promoted under Dowie? It just was like this unbelievable run of momentum and they ended up getting promoted. And you kind of feel that's what the team who gets promoted generally has and generally needs. So Leeds, even if they do make it, are on the down anyway, really, because they've just kind of dropped so far off.
Yeah, there's an old cliche in the Championship that there's always one. When you get near to the playoff season, there's always one. There's always one team that just gets on an incredible run of form and just smashes it. I remember when Southampton went up in second place, we looked like for all the world we were going up as champions, and then out of nowhere, Reading went on this incredible unbeaten run and pipped us to the title. And this season, it looks like we've had both Fulham and Sheffield Wednesday go on a fantastic run, and they've managed to capitalise on Leeds. It's strange.
The thing with Leeds as well is they've had Liam Cooper suspended, who's a big player for them, and I don't think they've won a game since he got 6-game ban after an incident at Reading, stamping incident. He got a 6-game, and they're not the same team without him. So I feel kind of if they do get in the playoffs, have him back because he's a big player for them. He's club captain, ex-Hull player. So I think they're desperately missing him as well.
Shouldn't be said, there'll be a lot of pressure on not just Gary Monk but the whole team if Leeds miss out on the playoffs, because there's a lot of rumours linking Pontus Jansson to my beloved Southampton. There's also a lot of rumours that Charlie Taylor will be leaving on a free transfer, probably to a Premier League side, because he's an absolutely fantastic fullback, and I think there'll be a lot of teams surprised how good he is when he eventually pops up in the Premier League next year. And of course, we don't know about Gary Monk. If he misses out on the top 6, will the owner look at that and say, you know what, you should have got us into the top 6, you were fired? You never know. Josh, just to quickly wrap us up, we might very well see Newcastle promoted on Monday night. They have a home game against Preston North End, but we did also see Brighton play on the Friday night. Strange game, 2 own goals from David Stockdale. Nothing you could do about either of them. I think you've put it down to a hangover, haven't you?
Yeah, it was certainly a massive hangover that was the problem with that team. I think if anyone saw that performance and have ever played football hungover, you saw a lot of parallels with the way that Brighton were playing. They were just very sloppy in their play, overly forcing things, because Norwich were very lucky to get their 2 goals. As you said, Alex Pritchard just managing to hit the bar and the post respectively, and then for it to go in off the back of David Stockdale in both occasions, for him to register 2 goals. it's strangely, I think that means his away goal record, David Stockdale, is pushing Glenn Murray's as well for the season, because Glenn Murray scores a lot of goals at home, not many away. So I'm pretty sure those are very close in terms of those figures. But it's all really what's gone through the Brighton fans is, we just wanted to lose this. So in theory, the title is won at the home game, Bristol City, on Saturday evening. It's the evening kickoff, because Newcastle would have played twice by then, and it could be the case that Brighton step out onto the field champions without having to kick a football. So there is an upside to that there'll be a trophy parade, and it's already confirmed in the city that there will be an open-top bus. It just is a case to confirm whether or not they'll be holding a piece of silverware come the weekend in May that they'll be doing so. But overall, I think it's been a very, very good season, and I wouldn't read too much into the performance that they put out, knowing full well that there were still some players that stepped out onto the field. I won't name any at this point, that were still out partying on Tuesday evening. So the fact that they went out there to Norwich on Thursday tells you everything you need to know, that they probably went out there with quite a few sore heads and certainly took to the field with them.
Yeah, it was a peculiar game. I think I agree with you that you watched it and it was not the normal Brighton side. They did look a bit lethargic, and there's a part of me that feels really upset for David Stockdale for the 2 goals he's conceded, both Alex Pritchard's shots coming back off the woodwork and bouncing off his back. Part of me that feels bad for Stockdale for the 2 own goals. Part of me feels bad for Pritchard, who's taken 2 really good shots there and hasn't got a goal for either of them. But there you go. Another weekend of the Championship done. Next weekend, when we're back with you, we'll have played 45 games, so we are into the penultimate weekend of Championship football. Like I say, Newcastle could be a Premier League side this time next week, but we shall have to wait and see. I suspect that Brighton will still be lifting a trophy come what may, but like you say, you never know in this division. So that is us done for another week. My thanks, first of all, to Josh for joining me. Thank you, Josh.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
And thank you very much to Joel.
Thank you very much.
I believe we are all off to go see some fascinating games in Europe tonight. I believe we have some small game between a side in Madrid and Barcelona. And there's also the small matter of Lyon versus Monaco tonight. So you'll hear all about them tomorrow night on the Monday Night Pod with Chris and the gang. I'm sure Chris will be back. I don't know what his obligations were tonight, but I'm sure they will not be affecting him Monday. So until then, as I will try and remember this again because I always struggle with this, keep your beard strong and your glasses trendy. And we'll see you next time.